What to do with your new deaf dog or puppy? The first thing I advise when getting a new dog, any dog, but specifically a deaf dog, is to have them on a harness and a long line. This line is about 10 foot. You can get a longer one. And the reason for that is management and prevention. By having your dog on a harness and long line in the house and the garden when they first arrive, you can pretty much prevent about 80% of training and behaviour problems that might pop up further down the track. This is because a lot of training and behaviour problems are self-rewarding, which means that when the dog does them even once, the dog finds it rewarding, so they're likely to do it again. These things include raiding the garbage bin, chewing on furniture, chewing on shoes, jumping fences, jumping on benches, anything along those lines. So by having them on this harness and long line when they first arrive, you can prevent a lot of those behaviours from ever occurring, and if they never occur, the dog is a lot less likely to do them in the future. So I would advise having your dog on a harness and long line for at least the first 3 weeks, potentially even longer depending on the dog. It may seem like a lot of work, but I promise you it's going to pay off tenfold down the track when your dog isn't showing any signs of annoying behaviour problems like digging in the garden, chewing on furniture, raiding the garbage bin, and things like that. When you're not at home with your new dog, I would suggest that you have a confinement area, such as a puppy pen, depending on the size of the dog, or a room that you can put them in where they can't get up to much trouble. Make sure they've got fresh water all the time and a nice comfy bed in their confinement room, lots of things to chew on, chew toys and that. The type of harness you should have for your dog is something that's obviously comfortable for the dog, but the other thing you need to be aware of is some harnesses still apply pressure to the neck, so you want to make sure that the harness comes down at the chest and not the neck, and that's because having a harness that is going to apply pressure to the neck is really dangerous on a long line. If the dog were to suddenly run and they reach the end of the leash, there's a massive jolt that on their neck, which is really dangerous. Another thing that's really important with your new deaf dog, or any dog, is to make sure that treats are really easily accessible. So I wear one of these really fashionable treat pouches, so I've always got treats on me. If you don't want to wear one of those, it might be a really good idea to have little pots of treats in every room of the house so that you can access them easily. And the reason for that is because you want to capture every time your new dog does a behaviour that you like. For example, my dog is lying really nice and calmly right now, and I really love that behaviour. I wish he would do it all the time. So I'm going to give him a few treats every time I see him do that, and that's because I want him to do it. I want him to feel really reinforced for doing that behaviour. A lot of people ignore their dog when they're lying nice and calmly on their bed, and the dog gets all the attention for things like barking or attention-seeking behaviours or coming up and leaning on their owner for attention, which is not necessarily a bad behaviour, but a dog that feels more reinforced for lying calmly is going to do that behaviour more often. When using treats for your dog, a lot of people worry, oh, my dog's going to get fat. Well, I use my dog's food allowance as his treats, so I don't actually give my dog any meals. He gets all of his meals throughout the day as treats, which means that I can measure out his daily food allowance in the morning with his food, and he gets that throughout the day every time I see him doing a good behaviour. I give him a reward. And that's going to make for a really nice, pleasant, calm dog in the house in the future. A really good tool to have for your new deaf dog is one or several of these. I have several. They're called Kongs. They are brilliant. Best thing since sliced bread in my opinion. I don't know what I would do without them. And what you can do is actually fill them with food and give them to your dog when you either leave the house or just as a treat in the afternoon. My dog gets his normal food in there, and then I put water in it and freeze it so that it takes him quite a long time to get it all out. It's a really great mental stimulation for the dog. They really have to work to get their food out, so it tires them out really quickly, and it's also really fun for the dog. They really love it, and it keeps them occupied and prevents them from getting up to other things they shouldn't be doing. So I would suggest you get a couple of these. So you've got your dog on their harness and long line in the house. What are you going to do when they go over and try and chew the furniture or pull towards the garbage bin in the kitchen? Well, with the hearing dog, trainers use something called a positive interrupter, and what this is it is something to get your dog's attention away from what they're doing and onto something else. This way the dog learns what they can't do, what they're never going to reach, such as the chair leg, and what behaviour is appropriate and reinforcing, i.e. the behaviours that you are going to reward often. With a hearing dog, these positive interrupters are often sounds such as a whistle or a kissy noise. Obviously with a deaf dog, you can't use those. So I've had to be a little bit creative, but I've come up with a way to teach a deaf dog a positive interrupter using your harness and long line, and it also means that you don't have to be right next to your dog when you use it. The technique is called leash shielding, and a lot of trainers use it when they're training a dog not to pull on the lead. The idea behind it is that every time the dog feels pressure on the lead, they give in to the pressure and come back to you, as opposed to continually pulling. So by teaching your dog to give in to leash pressure, you can use it as a positive interrupter. For example, my dog goes over and tries to chew the chair leg. I'm going to apply a bit of leash pressure. He comes back to me. He never got to the chair leg. He gets a great treat or something appropriate to chew on when he got back to me, and he gets rewarded for chewing on the appropriate thing. It's really important to note that this exercise is not about dragging your dog away from whatever it is they want to do. Dragging your dog by the harness or collar can be really stressful for the dog. So the pressure that you apply is minimal, and you're not actually going to drag your dog in any particular direction. If they pull on the leash and apply pressure, you're just going to hold that pressure until the dog gives in to that pressure and comes back to you. This is how you teach leash shielding. So you start by luring your dog, which literally means they're following food. So you're going to apply a bit of leash pressure, put a treat right in front of your dog's nose, and they're going to follow that treat whilst you apply a little bit of leash pressure. If your dog's not interested in the treat, you need to find a higher value treat, such as a bit of chicken or something along those lines. So again, a bit of leash pressure, the dog follows the treat. A bit of leash pressure, the dog follows the treat. Once you've done that a few times, the next time you're going to pretend to hold a treat in your hand, so your dog still is going to follow your hand thinking there's a treat in it, but then you're going to actually reach into your treat pouch or treat jar and give them a treat. So pretend treat, and when they give into that leash pressure, I'm going to reach in and give them a treat. Pretend treat, give them a treat. Once your dog has done that a few times, they should start to give in to that leash pressure, and as soon as they do, you're going to pop a treat in their mouth. Just going to turn it up here. Well done, yeah, that's clever. Yeah, clever. So you've done that a few times over a couple of training sessions. Now you're going to start adding distractions, now that your dog will give in to leash pressure with no distractions. So my first distraction is just going to be a little bit of dry dog food, not that exciting. If your dog is very excited by dry dog food, your distraction needs to start off lower, so something like a stick or a piece of cardboard, depending on what your dog is not that interested in but slightly interested in. So I'm going to show my dog that I've got that, make it a little bit exciting, and I'm going to throw it, when he's looking, throw it over there. As soon as he thinks to turn back into me, I'm going to give him a big reward for turning away from that distraction. So try that again. Bit of leash pressure. As soon as he thinks to turn back into me, I'm going to reward him. I would advise you not to release your dog to go and get the distraction, and that's because in a real life scenario, for example, he's going to raid the garbage bin, you apply a bit of leash pressure and he comes back to you and thinks, okay, now you always release me to go and get what you pulled me away from, or I came away from. So then he goes back to the garbage bin. You want to reward him for staying away from the distraction, not release him to go and get the distraction. So once your dog is really good at giving into leash pressure with a small, low-level distraction, then you can gradually build up the distraction to something like a piece of meat, then moving to outside where there are more distractions, more smells, and gradually building it up to really distracting things such as the garbage bin. It's really important if your dog were, for example, going to chew a leg chair and you applied a bit of leash pressure and they came away from them, don't give them treats for that behaviour. It's better to give them a chew toy, because they're obviously chewing or wanting to chew on the leg chair for a reason, and they need to satisfy that chewing urge. So by giving them a chew toy, you're telling them what's appropriate to chew on, and they get to satisfy their chewing instinct. If you happen to see your dog chewing on one of their own chew toys by their own volition, go up and reward that behaviour with a treat. The more that your dog feels rewarded for chewing on their own toys, the more they're going to do it in the future. The other positive interrupter you can teach your deaf dog is something that applies to if you're standing right next to your dog, or if your dog isn't wearing a harness and long line. And it's really simple to teach, and it's a simple tap or double tap on the head or body of the dog. If your dog is handling shy, which means they don't like being touched, then you need to work on handling exercises before you use this technique, because a dog that's handling shy can find this quite punishing, and it's not the idea. The idea is not to punish your dog. It's just a positive interrupter to get their attention away from what you don't want them to do. So to start, all you're going to do is tap your dog, feed a treat. 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 you've done that a few times now, and they're getting really good at it. If their attention's not on you, so if I place a treat there, his attention's not on me. Place a few treats there, so his attention's not on me. Tap your dog, yeah, well done. So rewarding your dog for bringing his attention back to you. Obviously you can just wait until your dog's attention's not on you. If your dog's not going to just lie there calmly while you place treats on the ground. That was obviously just for a demonstration. And then just like the leash shielding exercise, you're going to start adding distractions. So I'm going to throw a treat over there. Well done. Look, he's feeling a bit lazy, so he's not standing. There we go. Good boy. Okay. The eventual aim is that you want your dog to turn back to you. So I'm going to place a few treats there. Yeah, what's that? Tap him on the head, and when he turns back to me, I'm going to reward him. It's a good idea to start practicing this exercise with a harness and leash on. That way your dog actually can't get to the distraction you're using. Yeah, good boy. Well done. And just like the leash shielding exercise, gradually building up the distraction level. So let's talk about positive markers. A positive marker is something you use to mark your dog's good behaviour, to let your dog know that, yes, that was the behaviour I wanted. With hearing dogs, you would use something like yes or good, or if you've never seen one of these, it's called a clicker. A lot of trainers use it when training dogs, and it just makes a very sharp click sound. It's a very precise way of marking a dog's behaviour. There's also a lot of scientific evidence behind clickers. They reach the primal brain much faster than any other marker you can use, which means that the dog learns a lot faster. With a deaf dog, obviously you can't use a clicker or any yes or good words. So there are a couple of ways around this. This is a flashlight, and it is basically the deaf dog version of a clicker. Just like the very sharp click sound, it has a high, sudden flash, which also reaches the dog's brain much faster than any other marker, and thus the dog learns faster. So this, I would suggest getting a flashlight for your deaf dog. It's not necessary, but it is a very good tool to have, and your dog will learn faster with it. The type of flashlight you want is one with a barrel switch. That's because the ones with the on button and then an off button, it's quite difficult to get a really quick flash, whereas a barrel switch, it's quite easy to quickly slide forward and quickly slide back to get that sudden flash. The other marker I use with my deaf dog is a thumbs up, so either a 1 thumbs up or a 2 thumbs up. So how to teach a marker to your dog is quite simple. Basically, you're just going to pair the marker with a reward. So your dog learns very quickly that that marker means I get a treat. All you're going to do is show your dog the marker and feed a treat immediately after. Obviously you want to get a flashlight that's not really, really bright. You don't want to blind your dog. So once you've done that about 20 times, your dog will likely get the association between marker and treat, and you can start using it in training. So the other marker, as I said, is a thumbs up or double thumbs up. The reason I have two markers, the flashlight and the thumbs up, is because you can't always have a flashlight in your hands. Sometimes your dog does something really good and you don't have your flashlight and, oh, what am I going to do? So that's why thumbs up, really easy. Also, outside in broad daylight, a flashlight is going to be really difficult for your dog to actually see. So a thumbs up is going to be much easier to mark your dog's behaviour. You teach it the same way as you did with the flashlight. Thumbs up, feed a treat. 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 So one of the first things you want to teach your deaf dog is their name. Yes, deaf dogs can learn the name. I had to be a little bit creative when teaching Loki his name, because originally I was going to go with L for Loki, but for obvious reasons we went against that. Loki's name comes from Norse mythology. He's named after the god of mischief. So I decided to use the British Sign Language sign for trickster, which is this, for his name. The reason it's quite handy to teach your deaf dog his name is if you live in a house with multiple deaf dogs, it's quite handy to be able to ask one to do one thing and the other one to do another thing. For example, you might want one dog to come to you, oh, here Loki, here's your dinner, and you want the other dog to stay there while you give one dog his dinner, or anything like that. So by teaching your deaf dogs their individual names, you can ask them to do separate behaviours at the same time. So to start teaching your deaf dog their name, it's quite simple. You're just going to make the sign for their name and give them a treat. Make the sign for their name, give them a treat. You can do this exercise with your other dogs there as well. If you've got another deaf dog, you can make the sign for Loki and then make the sign for so-and-so and give them a treat. That way your dogs learn that only their specific name brings a treat to them, and the other dog's name doesn't bring a treat to them. And then you can start practicing things like, Loki, come. Well done. If the other dog comes as well, that's okay, but they don't get a treat for coming to the other dog's name, and eventually they'll learn to disregard anything to do with the other dog's name. So eventually I could ask one dog to come and the other dog would stay where they are, they wouldn't bother, or I could say, Loki, sit, and I could tell the other dog to lie down, or anything like that. So it's quite handy, and also nice for your dog to have a name that's theirs. Because deaf dogs can't hear people walking up behind them, they can get quite startled when they're all of a sudden touched from behind, and startling a dog can actually cause them to bite. So it's really important to desensitise your deaf dog to being startled. This exercise isn't for dogs that don't like being touched or that don't like being approached by strangers. If your dog doesn't like being touched, you need to work on handling exercises before you approach this exercise. If your dog doesn't like being approached by strangers, it's a good idea to get a vest that says I need space, so that other people are aware not to approach your dog when they see it in the street. To start this exercise, you need to start with your dog aware that you're there, so that he's not going to get startled when you touch him. And you're going to start by touching your dog from behind and feeding them a treat. Touching your dog from behind and feeding them a treat. This builds a positive association to being touched from behind. So once you've completed the first step over a few training sessions, you're going to start on step 2, which is having your dog not aware that you're there, having a nice tasty treat in your hand, going up to your dog, touching them and immediately placing that treat in their mouth, which again builds up that positive association with being startled, I got a really nice treat. Once your dog is very comfortable being touched from behind when they're unaware that you're there, it's time to generalise the behaviour to different environments, including outside, perhaps a cafe, on a walk, and places where they're likely to be startled by people coming up to pat them. So I hope you've enjoyed this training video. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments below, and please like, share and subscribe. Happy training!